Welcome back, V-Discovery viewers. Today we have Dani Barak with us again.
Hello.
That means it's going to be another forensics video, which everyone loves.
Oh, these are always fun.
Yep, today we're talking about what is needed for email collection. And one of the problems we have clients come over to us or send us an email saying, here's the email address, here's the password, get all the emails. But that's usually not enough information. But before we start, when is that enough information?
So when an email address and a password are enough for a data collection is usually for public email servers. So if it's a Yahoo account or an AOL account, usually
because it's obvious what that email is.
Right.
So what is the key piece of information that you need in addition to that?
So if it's not a Gmail account or if it's not a public email account, it could be a private server. That private server lives somewhere on the internet, but we need to know where it is. So we would need to know the server address and what protocols are supported. So what's a protocol? Different ways of communicating with the email server. Some older email servers, some that are available through your cable provider, often will only provide you POP access, which is not great because that only gives you access to the inbox and what's currently on that server at the time. Versus IMAP that gives you the whole folder structure and everything. So,
but if the clients don't know and they just give you a server name, you kind of be able to poke around and sort of figure it out. But if they know what to expect for us, it's always good to get a heads up so we know what's going to happen when we try to connect to it. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is changing passwords. Some of our clients are not comfortable giving away their passwords because sometimes that may be their pet name or maybe something embarrassing.
Or a password that they use for everything.
Something else. So one of the things we say, you guys can change your password to whatever something else, give it to us, and then once we're done collecting, you can change it back.
Yeah, that's often what people are comfortable doing by just doing it temporarily, changing it. Sometimes you can't change it back though because some services won't let you use the same password again.
Use the same password.
So that's something we'll let people know.
And then the other thing we need to consider is two-factor authentication, which is very popular. So what do we usually do for that situation?
So two-factor authentication is becoming standard across most of the new platforms. Like if you're on Office 365, if you're on Google and your administrator has not turned on dual-factor authentication, you probably should turn that on because those are targets for people who are trying to hack accounts. So how do we deal with that? You can tell somebody to turn it off, but that opens them up to the dangers of attack by malicious parties. Most of these platforms that support dual-factor authentication have something called an application-specific password. So Office 365 has that, Google has that, where you would go in, you would generate an application-specific password. That kind of bypasses the dual-factor authentication. It only works for one application, and that's it. So you have to generate new passwords every time you connect, essentially.
It seems like a lot to explain to a client. What if they just gonna stand by and wait for their authentication code and give it to you? Would that work?
Generally, what we do with our clients is they'll usually give us their authentication, they'll change the password, and then we'll coordinate that text message. And if it's a common service, we'll log in, we'll generate the device-specific ID, and then we'll grab that ourselves.
So, two quick things that are specific to other email providers. Is there anything special for Office 365?
Yes, so Office 365 and G Suite as well, some of these hosted platforms actually are starting to build in some compliance and export and search functionality. And they're getting pretty good at it. So for example, with Office 365, if we're told, okay, we have these 20 custodians that we need to download, we don't want to get each individual's username and password in order to download that information because Office 365 actually now has a compliance search and export functionality where you can, and this actually goes back to Exchange Server 2010, you can go in and you can essentially use an eDiscovery module to date range filter, select custodians, and then download the PSTs directly from the server without having to have usernames and passwords for each individual user. So what we do is we tell the administrator of that Exchange or Office 365 environment to provision us a limited account with access to search and export functionality, and then we can go in and do it without ever having people reset their passwords or working with that.
That makes things much easier.
Yeah.
And anything about Gmail?
So Gmail has a Google Vault function that works similarly, but Gmail, both for Vault and for personal accounts, does have a slightly different way of giving you the data. So while you can connect with IMAP utilities that are able to download the folder structure and hash out all the emails and download everything effectively, you can end up with a lot of duplicates if you do that. Google does have a export function that gives you an entirely validated export that you can get through a function called Google Takeout, or from Google Vault if you're an enterprise customer with the eDiscovery add-on. But what that's going to give you is an MBox file. And the big difference there is people like Nick hate working with
MBox files are they're just giant text files with all the information contained inside, and it's much more difficult in processing software to crunch through it.
Right, but the benefit of the MBox file versus the PST, a lot of people like to conform to the PST model, but the MBox gives you as much visibility into what Google sees as is possible, including the way that Google handles labels is a little bit different when you connect to it with IMAP. And what does that mean? That means that when you label something in Gmail, you can have one email with 5 labels on it. It's still one email in Gmail, but it actually is in 5 separate folder locations on IMAP. So if you download something using IMAP, you're going to have a lot of duplicates, and usually you're at least doubling the size because it has an all mail folder.
Right.
The all mail folder is like a label that applies to every single email. So you'll have the email in all the folders, the inbox, sent items, and everything, duplicated again in the all mail folder.
But in MBox, you're going to have a label in the email header that just tells you what were the labels.
Right.
And the difficulty there is actually parsing them out. So what we can do after we process the data, we can run a tool to scan through the email header and pull all those tags out and put them into a multiple choice field so that you can filter for inbox, sent, or if you're using colors to categorize it, so you'll be able to navigate through your labels.
Right, and it more effectively mimics what Google actually provides the end user as opposed to just trying to translate it into a traditional IMAP structure.
All right, I think that's going to be it for us. Danny, thank you very much for joining us today. Guys, don't forget to follow eDiscovery on social media networks listed on your screen. And for previous videos, check us out on YouTube. Thanks for watching.